Hello and welcome to week 4 of the Managing Volunteers course. I'd like to just start by saying thank you to everybody for getting their assignments in. I will be looking at those by the end of this week on Friday, and we'll come back to you with feedback. And another thank you for you coming back with your dates and things, and I will send an email out this afternoon just clarifying which the slots you've got for assignment 2, so that you're not sitting around with penciled in times in your diary. So thank you for both of those things. So today what we're hoping to do is to do a recap of where we are on the course, just have a quick review of the recruiting volunteers activities, a look at assignment 2, and a starting unit 2. Understand how organisations can support, develop and manage volunteers. So we'll be starting that today. So the quick recap on where we are with the course. There are 2 units to this course. The first unit is the involving volunteers, which is the one that we have been doing. So it has 2 assignments. Assignment 1 you've done, and assignment 2 is the one that will happen in the next 2 weeks on the agreed slots. Unit 2 is the supporting, developing and managing volunteers, and that has just the 1 assignment with it, which is assignment 3, and that is due on the 21st of November at 5 p.m. So we're in the process of next 2 weeks taking part in doing the assignment 2, and we are starting this week in this tutorial to look at the topic that is covered by Unit 2, which is supporting, developing and managing volunteers. So I don't think I'm going to do the recap of the post-it note exercise, but I will just remind you of it and say that it's in the Moodle book for last week, week 3, and it would be a good exercise to do, especially in relation to your preparation for our chats on assignment 2. Again, I suggested doing a mind map around what are the resources that you have in your organisation that will help you recruit volunteers, from people to other things, money. What strengths or opportunities are there in your community? And in our community for assignment 2 is a village called Northside, which I'll talk more about later. So again, suggest, if you haven't already, have a go at the mind map exercise I suggested, as that might help you in your preparation for assignment 2. Assignment 2 is straightforward case study. You are on the management committee of a community group who is going to take over the running of the local public library in February 2017, and you have agreed to take on the role of volunteer coordinator. So you're going to be running the public library in February 2017, and I think that this might be territory that is familiar to both of you, to those of you that are from Leicestershire and from Warwickshire, as I both believe that you have community libraries on the go at the moment. And you have 2 tasks to think about. The first is to describe the different approaches you would take to recruiting volunteers, and then explain the approach you would wish to use, given reasons for that choice. Just moving on my bits here. And your second task is to assess the factors within the recruitment process that can lead to effective recruitment and suggest which of these factors would be important in the recruitment process for Northside Library. So I've mentioned Northside a couple of times. Let's just find out a little bit more about Northside. Northside Library. Northside is an invented place, fictitious. It's not the library that I'm involved with. It has a population of 7,500, which actually I should just change that to town, because that's actually quite a large village. I think if we were talking about Leicestershire, we would be looking at Broughton Astley side of things. This village is smaller, if thinking of Warwickshire, is smaller than Atherstone, probably around the size of Whitnash, really. So you're sort of thinking about those types of communities that might be familiar to you. It's got a lot of amenities, doctor's surgeries, post office, pub, supermarket, and it's got lots of activities that are happening there as well, from Girl Guides to Scouts and onwards. You will find information about this assignment and the case study and Northside on the Moodle site under assignment 2. I'm not giving you a lot of information about Northside Library or a community. So you can add things in if you want, or suggest things that might be going on in that sort of community as well. So if you want to stray outside the bits of information I've given you, that's perfectly okay within the assignment. And Northside Library, they've had a look at what they want to use volunteers for, and they've actually come up with 3 distinct roles that they can see that they want volunteers for. So the first role really is the one in the middle there, library support volunteer. They need the most of that role, about 45. That's the role that in libraries you will see most frequently. Somebody that's behind the counter, issuing and discharging and helping you to find the books you want, reserve the books, all of that kind of thing. But they've actually decided they want volunteers on top of that doing 2 other distinct roles. The first of those is IT buddy. They're wanting somebody that will come in once a week and be an IT buddy for people to come in and ask around IT issues. And their second is that they're hoping to start a story time for under 5s, and they want a story time volunteer. So the thing to remember about these is that a story time volunteer might well not be a library support volunteer, and the IT buddy again might not be the library support volunteer. So they are seeing 3 distinct roles within their community library. So if I go back to the assignment and look at the first task that is on there, and the first task starts with the assessment word describe. Describe the different approaches you would take to recruiting volunteers. So, a few weeks ago, I mentioned that describe is one of the assessment terms used throughout this course, and you can find a little activity that was in week 1 around assessment terms, and that covers the assessment term describe. So go back to that just to have a look at what describe means. Basically, give a clear overview that includes all the relevant features, or for shorthand, paint a picture with words. It's the most straightforward of assessment terms. So for this assignment, we are looking for you to describe, to look at the different approaches that you could have, and then describe maybe one or two of those approaches that you would take for Northside. So you don't need to just pick on one approach. And here we're obviously thinking about the things we covered last week, like targeted, ambient, concentric circles. How are you going to find those volunteers? And it could be that you choose a different approach dependent on the role that you're looking at as well. So that's the first task that you're being asked to do. I'm not going to do that today. Move quickly on there. So back to the assignment and the second task that you are being asked to do, which starts with the assessment term assess. Assess factors within a recruitment process that can lead to effective recruitment and suggest which of these factors would be important in the recruitment process for Northside Library. So what I'm going to do actually is just break down that task a bit so that it's easier for you to understand. So the words in bold I'm going to talk about a little bit more in this tutorial. And the first of those words is assess. I've given you here the definition that AIM Awards gives for assess, which is give consideration to all the factors, the events that apply, and then make a careful and valued judgment as to which are the most important or relevant. So if we go back there, it's asking you to assess factors within a recruitment process that can lead to effective recruitment, and then suggest which of these factors would be important in the recruitment process for Northside. So it's wanting you to look at some of the factors that go to make up an effective, successful recruitment process. But it's then wanting you to specifically think about Northside and go, what might be the most important factors for Northside to get right in that process? Because with recruitment, one size does not fit all in terms of the processes, the selection. We touched on this last week. Really, the organisation that you're with, the roles that you're wanting to find volunteers for will all play a part in how you handle the recruitment process and what it looks like for your organisation. So the things that might be important for Northside might not be the same if it was a completely different organisation. So we're wanting to sort of get you to think about Northside and decide what might be the most important thing for them. So we've had a look there at the assess. So the next one is the recruitment process. And just to say that when it uses that term, we're thinking here of the whole process, from advertising, the approach that you take, through to selecting whether you have application forms, formal interviews, informal interviews, you take up references, you do DBS checks. So it's the whole of that recruitment process. It doesn't cover the induction process side of things. It is thinking about advertising, recruitment, selecting. Effective recruitment is, and I gave you this last week as well, successful, effective recruitment is not about getting as many volunteers as possible. It's about finding the right number of the right type of volunteers. And I would also suggest that this is effective recruitment is also plays a part in you finding yourself later on with committed volunteers, with volunteers that are committed to your organisation. If you've already done an effective recruitment and selection process, then it will lead to a good number of committed volunteers within your organisation. So the last point that was in the second task was for you to think about the factors within the recruitment process. So what are the factors that might be there? And I would suggest that if you're watching this as a recording, to just pause at this moment and think, okay, what are the factors that could be important in a recruitment process? What are the factors within the recruitment process that you need to get right? And so on the next slide, I have listed a few of those, but these are only a few of the factors. The first one is choosing appropriate filtering methods. And by filtering, I mean that you have gradually got the volunteers before you ever get to the point of having to select which ones you're going to have, that they have already started to filter themselves out of the equation. And they may have filtered themselves out because you were clear in the role description of the sort of hours that you wanted and the commitment level that you wanted from them. It may be that within the advert you said something about the sort of qualities you were looking for in the person or skills. So filtering process can be a factor within an effective recruitment process. Refusing people, well, this might seem like an odd one, but it is actually important one, because you need to actually, in some cases, refuse people. And a lot of organisations think, oh my goodness, I've struggled to get volunteers in the first place. How can I turn somebody away? But if you've really got somebody that is not going to be suitable for that role, that will have a knock-on effect in a whole wealth of different ways for your volunteer programme. So you do need to do it, but you need to do it giving it some thought. So it needs to be done in a sensitive manner, not just broad brushstrokes, "Vum, we don't want you." You should give consideration to answering their questions if they want to know why you didn't feel that they were suitable for volunteering at your organisation. The other thing to think about refusing people well is that, take the example of the North Side Library. If you turned somebody down within that community, and that was somebody that had been in that community for a long time, and they went off and started sharing that information with people, oh, well, they turned me down, that actually affects how successful your organisation is going to be within that community, if you've got somebody that's already saying, oh, they turned me down. My third thought was that an effective marketing message is a factor that you need to get right. And last week we looked at an acronym ADA, which is used by the marketing people, and I suggested another alternative to that in terms of thinking about your marketing message. So that getting that right can be important. Initial contact with the volunteer, and what I mean by that is, you might have put onto your poster or your leaflet, you might have put a clear call to act and how they do that. So please give us a call, please email us, please ring this number. And if they do that, you need to make sure that there's something at the other end of that where their interest is acknowledged quickly. As somebody that's been involved in brokerage, one of the things that I know only too well, and I'm sure that some of you from Warwickshire that are involved in brokerage will have experienced this, is that a lot of people ring organisations and then nobody ever calls them back for a week. And that person will just walk away from that organisation and say, I don't want to volunteer for them anymore. And it can set the tone of their volunteering with you if it starts with them having to work really hard to get you to take an interest in them. As I said, that's not the only factors that you could think up that would lead to an effective recruitment of volunteers. There are others that are listed within the indicative content for the assignment. So by all means have a look there as well. So just to recap on that, assignment 2 will happen over the next 2 weeks at agreed time slots, and I will let you know by the end of today when your slot is. Remember to take a look at the indicative content and the marking guide that are included with assignment 2. Read the case study, and as I've suggested, if you've not already had a go, sit down and have a go at the post-it and mind map, applying it to Northside Library. In terms of the professional discussion that I will have with you, I will send you a link and you will click on that near the time. You will need to have a microphone, either inbuilt or otherwise, so that I can hear you. It's not essential for you to have a camera, though I find it helps if we can actually see each other, but I know that using the camera and getting that set up can be a difficult thing to do. The session will be recorded, but it won't be recorded in the first few minutes. So when you come into the session, there'll be a chance for us to have a chat and just check that you are okay with what we are about to do. And basically, I will be asking you those 2 tasks that we have just looked at. So I will be asking you to describe the approach you would take to Moorside Library and also to assess the factors. I might ask you some follow-up questions if I don't think that you have clarified the points that you're making well enough, or I'm not understanding them. And all of that will be a recorded session. So that's as much as I'm going to say about assignment 2, and I'm hoping that that's all okay. Please, as always, contact me via email, send me a message. If you want to have a talk with me beforehand, then please say that you want to do that and we can arrange a time to do that. So, as I said at the beginning, just the course outline recap. You've done assignment 1, which was attached to unit 1. We've just looked at assignment 2, which is attached to unit 1. And we're now moving on to unit 2, supporting, developing and managing volunteers. Move on my slide. And this has just one assignment, assignment 3, and that is due on the 21st of November at 5 p.m. So after our last live tutorial, you have got a couple of weeks after that to do the assignment 3. And just to say, after the live tutorial and up until the 21st of November, you obviously can carry on contacting me and talking to me and showing me what you've written and everything like that. Even though there are no more live tutorials after the 2nd of November, you will still be working on your assessment and you can still contact me. So moving on to Unit 2. which for me, I see that there are two key underlying points behind volunteer programme success. So what I'm doing here really is just doing an introduction to Unit 2. The topics and criteria within Unit 2 I will feature in the next two tutorials. This week I'm really just doing an introduction to the topic. And for me, if you want to run a successful volunteer programme, which I imagine you obviously do, there are 2 points. The first is that you need to have a clear understanding why people volunteer and the implications on your volunteer programme of that. And second, you need effective leadership of the volunteer programme. And I'm using the word leadership there instead of management. I think that this effective leadership most often sits within the role of the volunteer manager, the volunteer coordinator. It's effective leadership. You're the champion for that volunteer programme. And what needs to happen there is that all the needs of the parties involved need to be managed. I'm going to say a bit more about that in a couple of minutes, but first of all, just to look at the first part of that, which is understanding why people volunteer. We've already discussed, and many of you mentioned in assignment 1 actually, that there are lots of implications for the roles that you develop and the way that you advertise that are based on why people come forward and want to volunteer. So you've already shown a clear understanding that why people volunteer is important to know. But it also has implications for how you support and manage those volunteers as well. So, why do people volunteer? Again, if you're watching this as a recording, I would suggest that you pause and just give a few moments thought to why people volunteer. You have come up with many of those reasons in the previous tutorials and in your assignments as well, but just give some thought to the wide range of reasons that people actually volunteer. And up on Moodle, I have put up a chart there which has categorized the different reasons that people volunteer. So please go and have a look at that. I've also put up another resource which is gives you an idea of which are the most popular reasons that people give to volunteer. That might be an interesting read for you. So what are some of the implications in terms of why people might want to volunteer for your organisation in terms of how you look after that volunteer? So one of the reasons that people can give for wanting to volunteer for an organisation is about gaining a sense of achievement. So if you had somebody that you knew from having a chat with them when they came to see you first of all in your formal or informal chats that you had with them, and they said that they were trying to gain a sense of achievement, then in terms of the management of this volunteer, you might decide that recognition of their achievements would take the form of giving them more challenging tasks. I'm sure that somebody's not going to sit there when you ask them and say, I want to gain a sense of achievement, but I also feel that you would understand if that was an important motivation through what they were saying. Some people will say, well, I want to keep my skills at a high level. I want to be stretched a bit. And in that case, you could actually, for that individual volunteer, as I've said, give them more challenging tasks. If they complete a straightforward one, think about just moving them up a bit and giving them something that's a bit more challenging, if you know that's actually what they are looking for from their volunteering. The second that I said I feel underpins the success of a volunteer programme is the effective leadership of the volunteer programme, which is the understanding and managing the needs of all of the parties involved. So what are the main parties involved within a volunteer programme, and what are their needs? And the easiest way that I can find to illustrate this is to show you a Venn diagram model here. So I would say that the three parties that are involved in the volunteer programme are the individual themselves, it is the group of volunteers, and it is the task, i.e. the organisation, and what it is wanting from the volunteer programme. So each of those parties that are involved within that have their own set of needs. This diagram is actually based on something that is a well-known theory of leadership, nothing to do with volunteering at all. It's a broader theory of leadership that has international recognition, and it's called action-centered leadership model. So this model that I've adapted here is based on the Adair's action-centered leadership, if you wanted to read up on that at all. So I'm suggesting here that those three parties all have sets of needs that you have to think about if you want a successful volunteer programme. And if you notice from that diagram, those needs actually will overlap between the different parties involved. So let's think about what are some of the needs that there might be, rustling away there. Just going to go back there. So what are some of the needs that people might have who have come to volunteer for you? So if you think about the individual, the needs they might have is that they might have particular needs that motivated them in the first place to volunteer with you. They might have a need that they want to improve things on their CV, they want to gain new skills. So they might come to you with those needs, but they may have other needs. And these are needs that most people have, emotional needs. They want to feel valued. They want to feel connected with other people, maybe. They want to feel that that this volunteering is helping their self-esteem. In terms of the group might want to feel that they're confident in doing the role, that they understand what the organisation is wanting from them as a team of volunteers, that they are feeling connected to the whole organisation. And on the third side, on the task or the organisation side, then the needs there are going to be very much towards what you're asking the volunteers to actually do. So that will be about the goals that you might set for them. It's about the reviewing of their performance as individuals or as a group. And we will touch on this again, because obviously that particular aspect is something that a lot of volunteer managers go, well, we're not so sure about that size, reviewing performance, setting goals. That doesn't really fit with volunteers, and maybe it doesn't sit there in a formalised process for your organisation. It still needs to happen in some kind of way, because you are interested in the task being done well. You might have an individual that's come to volunteer at Northside Library, and they might be loving it, feeling really connected. They're loving being with the other volunteers. They're gaining a lot from it. It's improved their computer skills. But at the same time, every time somebody comes in the library, they're really rude to them. And people, members of the public, are actually trying to avoid coming in on the shift that that person is on. So there is a point where you do need to be reviewing the performance of the volunteers as a group or as individuals, but how you do that and the form that takes, again, one size does not fit all in terms of that. So that was my introduction to the Unit 2, which looks at supporting, developing and managing your volunteers. So you're on familiar ground. Many of you will be on familiar ground here, I feel. So my objectives for this tutorial was to go over where we were on the course, just to have a look at the reviewing the recruiting volunteers activities. Well, we didn't do that in that there is nobody with me today, so there didn't feel like much point in doing that. But please do have a go at post-it and mind mapping. To have a look at assignment 2, which was the bulk of the tutorial, and then to do an introduction to Unit 2, the understanding how organisations can support, develop and manage volunteers. So I'm thinking that we have done all of those things. So our next steps, there is no live tutorial next week. The next live tutorial is on the 2nd of November at 2 p.m. What I will do by tomorrow morning is I will put up the recording of this tutorial, and I will also make live the book for this week. But what I have done is I've combined it into a book for this week and next week. So you've really got the 2 weeks to have a look at those resources. So there will be not only a recording of this tutorial, but there will be several smaller videos going over topics, and I've combined them all into one book. So just to say again that there is no live tutorial for next week. That's mainly because a lot of you will be going through with assignment 2. The bulk of you actually will be doing assignment 2, and I think that your focuses will be towards that. So hopefully that is all straightforward and clear. And if it's not, as always, please contact me in some way and have a word with me about that. So thank you very much, and I wish you well for assignment 2. Thank you and goodbye.